got a little out of order. We have anticipatory warrants, then we might skip ahead depending on how long this video is. And I just ordered pizza, so if the doorbell rings, I'm gonna eat my pizza. It's cauliflower crust though, so it's keto. Anticipatory warrants. So the warrants are generally executed during the day, and you have to return to the judge and let them know what information was received. But it's not clear whether, if they violated these statutory limits, that the evidence would be excluded. Great for them, huh? And maybe not, it just makes us litigate more. Like, okay. So, anticipatory warrants are warrants that are allowed for an arrest or search if there is some type of precondition that occurs. So you're saying, I may not have probable cause yet, but if this triggers, then I have probable cause. So Scalia says that these are constitutional, and this is based on the Grubbs case where they said they're aware that drugs are being delivered. They say if the person accepts this package, then the warrant can give us the authority to arrest or search the person in their home. So it requires 2 probable cause requirements for this, and 1 must be probable cause to believe the anticipated element precondition will occur. And then if the anticipatory event occurs, that there is then probable cause for the search and arrest. So probable cause to believe that the event will occur, and then probable cause, and then you have to, once it is delivered or the event happens, then that there is probable cause to arrest. So that's that. Then there is the sneak and peek warrant. Part of the Patriot Act after 9/11 expanded the federal government's ability to get information. So McGoldrick does not like this. He doesn't believe, well, he doesn't believe the whole thing was unconstitutional, but he thinks they expanded the search to their ultimate limits. So this is an exception to the warrant requirement. When a warrant is executed, the judge has to be told about it, and the person being searched has to be told that they are being searched, so they can't do it secretly. So this provides an exception with regard to wiretaps with organized crime. So that's the sneak and peek. If you wiretap someone's conversation and within 48 hours you inform them, then the odds are it's going to be pretty hard to wiretap them in the future. So with regard to organized crime, they developed this statutory rule that if you wiretap someone, you don't have to tell them right away that you wiretapped them. You have 6 months where you can keep doing it without letting them know, and you could keep doing that for an additional period after. Real clear right there. The sneak and peek is just that exception for purposes with crime related to terrorism. Police can enter a place, don't have to inform them until the investigation is complete. All right, and then we have the knock and announce, and this is a statutory rule. The execution of a search warrant or arrest warrant at a person's house. First, a moth just flew in front of my face. Tried to touch me. Ugh, bugs. Sorry. Knock and announce rule. The execution of a search warrant or arrest warrant at a person's house, they first have to knock and announce their presence. This only applies to the execution of a search and arrest warrant. It gives occupants a chance to open the door and it prevents violence. But there's some like, what is, you knock and wait. So how long is too long? If there is an implied denial of entrance, they can go in after 20 or 30 seconds. If they aren't allowed entrance, then they can break in. And exceptions to the requirement of the knock and announce. This is not an exception to having a warrant. They still need a warrant. But if the door is ajar, then the door is open as for the knock and announce. But also, they can use trickery. Knock, knock, Avon calling. You open the door. Just knock, knocked and announced. So he doesn't like trickery, but you can. Trickery, Richard v. Wisconsin. Trickery done in this case, knock on the hotel room door and said it's maintenance. Officer with a maintenance uniform. It wasn't well executed. There was a guy in uniform behind the maintenance guy, and the guy saw it. So anyway. Then you also have exigency, which he keeps saying we're going to keep doing, but we have some, I think. So maybe that was the day I was gone. Maybe. Anyway, I got notes from that day. The same exigency that excuses the knock and announce also serves the search warrant. If they believe there is an exigency, probable cause to believe that someone is trying to exit or destroy evidence, then they can go in. The search warrant requirement is higher than a knock and announce requirement. So there's three categories of exigency: hot pursuit, destruction of property evidence, danger to the public or police officer. Those are exigency, hot pursuit, destruction of property, or danger. The knock and announce, they have to reasonably expect there is one of those forms of exigency. Okay, so if they don't have a search warrant but they have exigency, then they must knock and announce. For exigency, they have to have probable cause to believe one of the three categories. So that someone's running away because they need to be in hot pursuit, there's destruction of property evidence, or there's a danger. All right, so Richards v. Wisconsin, they said if it's involving felony possession of drugs, then you don't. They had a rule that anytime there was a search warrant involving a felony possession of drugs, there was automatic exigency, which meant they could just enter. The court said there is no per se rule here. Exigency has to be based on individualized cases, and each individualized case is based upon the defendant, crime, overall atmosphere, all of the facts at the police officer's disposals, and that's how they have to base their decision on exigency. They cannot make a per se rule that there is always going to be danger for two reasons. Danger does not describe every single drug dealer, not exigency with every person guilty of a felony drug crime. And if we have a per se rule, why not other crimes? Armed robbery, they're armed, right? We cannot have a per se rule. We have to make we have to make a determination based on individual cases, based on facts. All right, no-knock warrants. This is where warrants, these are not in all jurisdictions. The judge makes the determination based upon the facts that are available, nature of crime, past experience, and that there is sufficient danger here to allow a no-knock warrant. So all warrants, you gotta knock and announce, but there's these no-knock warrants, and the only exception to the no-knock warrant, if they don't have no-knock warrants, the only exception is exigency. In the execution of a search warrant and entering house pursuant to a warrant and without warrant, there can be some destruction of property is fine. Okay, so the police can damage property. So if it's excessive, they can be held liable for it. All right. Argument, no-knock warrant, lower court threshold for amount of property to be destroyed. Court says some. And that's all we're going to say. That's basically what they say. In USB banks, they knock and announce. They break in after 30 seconds. The guy is getting out of the shower and didn't hear the knocking. So the police believed that they had implied denial of entry. And they said it was based on exigency. They thought maybe destruction of property. The police already had about this particular object. It was enough to be able to enter without having a knock and announce. The fact that they waited 30 seconds, increased the danger, made the entry allowed. In Hudson v. Michigan, they said a violation of the knock and announce rule does not lead to the exclusion of evidence. Isn't that great? They did have a search warrant. They entered without knocking or announcing. He was in his chair. He had drugs and a gun. Police have a search warrant, but they did not have a no knock and announce, which means they should have. If the police had knocked and announced their presence, there would have been enough time to hide the gun and the drugs. So it should be excluded, is their argument. And the court says no. If they don't knock and announce, we're not going to exclude it. The violation of knock and announce rule was not the reason why they found the drugs and gun. They would have found it regardless. So them entering when they did was not the only reason they found it. And the purpose of the knock and announce rule is to prevent unnecessary destruction of property, not to allow the suspect to hide the evidence of their crime. Even if police had the obligation to knock and announce and they don't, it doesn't exclude the evidence. Okay, we already talked about the birthing center. They did have a warrant, but they said that was unreasonable due to this new mother. When is the search complete? That's our next question. And the answer is when they find the specific items they're looking for, the search is over. They cannot continue searching for other things. With regards to some items, though, like drugs, money, papers, it's hard to know when the search is over because there could be limitless. So they can continue as long as they can continue. It's not in my notes right here, but I do believe someone was saying, I do believe he said that if you leave, you need a new warrant. You can't just like come back day after day after day. It's not gonna work. Can we do? Yeah, let's do unreasonable force on this video, and then we'll do stop and frisk tomorrow. Because then we're like up to like last week, so we're making headway. All right, so excessive force. There are two different rules, one for deadly force and one for unreasonable force. So in Garner, neighbors hear a break-in, they call the police. The police, in investigating, observe someone fleeing out the back door, and the police observes someone who is short and young. As it turns out, he's 15. Police officer tells him to stop, and the boy starts to climb a fence. So the officer shoots, and he hits him in the back of the head, and he kills him. Under Tennessee law, it's legal for someone shooting someone to prevent them fleeing at a burglary. The lower court dismissed the wrongful death action without any evidence being presented. Goes all the way to Supreme Court. They said the lower courts couldn't even figure out what constitutional amendment was violated. Court described what was permissible for deadly force. They say deadly force cannot be used to stop a felon from escaping unless there is some danger to the police officer or others. So a felony is not necessarily a capital offense that you can shoot someone on the spot for. Let's put that out there right now. So they said just preventing a felon from escaping is not enough for deadly force, which I think is a good law. And then, so that was our deadly force case. And then our Connor case is unreasonable force. He asked a friend to drive him to the local convenience store to get some orange juice to offset the diabetic attack he was having. He runs into the convenience store. There's a long line, says he will have an attack, so he runs back out. Police officer observes him running in and running out and thinks that's reasonable suspicion to stop his car. The friend says he's just having a diabetic attack. He needs help. The police officer calls for backup. At some point in time, Graham gets out of the car and runs around it a few times and plops on the sidewalk and passes out. now there are 5 cops, and when he comes to, 4 of the police officers throw him on top of the car, and a friend keeps trying to get him something sweet so he doesn't die, and the cops won't let him. The end result, they break his foot, his shoulder, and he has a concussion. He sues for excessive force. Lower courts dismiss the case, probably qualified immunity, because it's always the case. And then Supreme Court says, that's excessive force. That's excessive force. So they make some factors. And they say, listen, we're going to look at the severity of crime. Here, there was no crime. And even if there was, it would have been like shoplifting or something not that bad. And then we have the threat of suspect to police. Here, he was passed out. There was no threat. And then we have whether the suspect is resisting arrest. And these factors determine how much force you can use. So if the guy's passed out, probably not much of a threat. If he comes to, okay, maybe, but we don't have any facts about that. So, severity of the crime, threat to the police, whether suspects are resisting arrest. And then in Scott v. Harris, cops are looking for speeders. Someone is going 73 to 55. Officer chases for some reason because he continues to flee. One of the officers in this chase decides to do precision impact drill, which is where you like tap the side of the car. But instead, he goes and rams straight into the back, sends the car over a cliff. The person who is fleeing ends up quadriplegic for speeding. And they say whether or not deadly force is unreasonable force was. So they're looking at whether it was unreasonable. And Justice Scalia says, hey, high-speed chase, whether force was necessary to stop him, whatever force was necessary to stop him was justified. They said, it's tragic, but he wasn't just speeding. He was a threat to the public because of this high-speed chase. And we had video. So they were able to see what was going on. And they said there was danger to the public, and therefore the severity of the crime, speeding wasn't, but it was a threat to the police, and it was a threat to the public, and it was definitely resisting arrest. And they needed to stop him, and they did. So that's that. And next time we'll do stop and frisk, but not tonight.